Trump has really damaged the United States reputation and soft power, and also the reliability or credibility of the United States in the world through this very destructive, very aggressive rhetoric.
Hi, I'm Jo Crawford and welcome to Times Radio's Trump Report. Today I'm joined by Thorsten Wojczewski, lecturer in international relations at Coventry University. Thank you for joining me on the Trump Report today.
Glad to be here.
You said that the first election of Donald Trump in America, it was one of the most striking manifestations of this recent populist upsurge that we're seeing. I mean, how would you describe how that's evolutionized since 2016 when Trump first came into office? And how would you compare what Trump 1.0 compares to Trump 2.0?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few differences. I mean, in 2015 and 2016, Trump really used this populist rhetoric and mobilization strategy. It was not Democrats versus Republicans anymore. It was basically the people versus this corrupt establishment in Washington. So basically draining the swamp in Washington and so on. So this played a very, very important role in his first campaign, and also in a way informed parts of his first administration. But I think, I mean, at least in my research, I also noticed a shift in his rhetoric. So a bit away from populism to a more classical left versus right mobilization strategy. So in the second part of his first term, so basically from 2018 onwards, basically the prime enemy, so to say, were the so-called radical left-wing Democrats. So basically, he even after the elections, he even blamed the Democratic Party for basically stealing the election. So this is not a populist rhetoric or mobilization strategy anymore. So it's a rather classical far-right strategy. So basically claiming that the political opponents, they are radical, they must be contained. This is a struggle for the survival of our nation, as Trump put it. That is a clear departure. So what we can clearly see, I think, and also when we look at his first term in office, compared to his very, very radical and destructive rhetoric, his track record, when we look at, I mean, destruction of the administrative state, suspending civic liberties, weakening the separation of power in his first term, Trump's assault against US democracy was more limited. Obviously, there are different explanations for that. Maybe partially it was his political inexperience, also that there was no real consistency and continuity in his administration. So it was basically, I mean, he fired many of his advisors. So there were many changes in his administration, also a lot of internal struggles. There was also obviously resistance from within the administration, so from the different government departments, who were basically blocked some of or prevented or undermined some of Trump's initiatives. And when we now look at the first weeks of his second term, obviously there is a clear change. I mean, so Trump has already began with the destruction of the administrative state, basically shutting down government agencies such as USAID, also removing thousands of civil servants. So this is a clear and substantial difference that we can already see here. And I mean, in a way, Trump now delivers on his promise to basically to destroy the so-called deep state. So we can clearly see here a difference between his first term in office and the second term in office.
And I think when we look at sort of the classical definition of populism, it's that idea of us versus them, that, you know, the elite in society, there's some sort of element of corruption there, and that the common people, they're the people that they've got the moral standing there. I mean, when we look at Doge, for example, Elon Musk, you know, richest man in the world, how does that tech billionaire bromance fit in with that idea of, you know, standing up against the elite in some respect? I mean, how does that all fit in?
You're absolutely right. There is a clear contradiction. I mean, Trump itself, himself, he is a billionaire. So obviously he is in many ways part of the establishment. So he's part of the elite. But in the case of populism, it's basically more about you're basically constructing this antagonism between the people on the one side and the elites on the other side. So you're basically claiming there is some kind of disconnect, so that the elites are not representing the people anymore. They are aloof, they are corrupt, they are incompetent, they are lazy, and so on. And basically, the populist leader then promises in a way to overcome this representational gap, to mitigate this gap by basically promising to restore the popular will, to basically delivering on addressing all the various societal grievances that exist. And in principle, also a politician who is very elitist can do that. And in the case of Trump, at least, he, of course, can quite convincingly claim that he is a political outsider. He's not a career politician. And I think that was his main selling point. And the second selling point was, I'm so rich, I can't be corrupted. I use my own money. That's basically what he usually, this kind of phrase is what he used very frequently in his campaigns. I can't be corrupted. All these other politicians, they are bought. They are basically backed by these, big corporations, lobbyists, and so on. I'm rich. I don't care. I can do whatever I want. And I basically have decided that I will represent you. I will basically represent what he called the forgotten men and women of America. So that is basically how he the kind of selling point that he used in his campaigns. And I think this is also why other Elon Musk, for example, is associated with Trump and basically with this kind of idea of Trumpism.
And obviously that approach that Trump's taken has been very successful in garnering support from the American public. I mean, what would you say about it is so convincing for American people? But also, what does that say for politicians who don't follow that populist rhetoric, that populist line of thought? What should, for example, the Democrats be doing to try and combat that and act as a suitable opposition?
I think, first of all, there is no easy response or solution to populism. I think this very emotional, very simplistic rhetoric is very appealing because there are real grievances in society. So be it poverty, be it practices of exclusion, be it the negative effects of globalization, or in Europe, basically the negative effects of the financial crisis, and also some negative aspects of the European integration process, and so on. And in a way, if you use a populist rhetoric, so basically you identify scapegoats such as the elites, and in the case of the populist radical right, also minorities, immigrants, and so on. This is quite satisfying for those people who are in a way dissatisfied with certain aspects, also who might be negatively affected by certain modernization or transformation processes. So it's also about privileges, it's about status, and so on. And they feel that they lose them, and so basically they need someone to blame. And populism, in some ways, offers that, especially in the case of Trump. So basically, he identifies those who are allegedly responsible for our problems, and basically he promises then basically to address all these different societal conflicts, grievances, and so on by identifying this clear enemy. So, but what other political parties should not do is they should not try to emulate this kind of rhetoric. So especially when it comes to the issue of migration, what research clearly tells us is voters will vote for the original. They will not basically, if center-right parties adopt the similar stance on immigration issues, they will not benefit from that. And we can see that, 2 days ago in the German elections, despite the fact that the center-right Conservative Party in Germany adopted a quite hardline anti-immigration course, and basically this did not pay off. The people voted for the original, namely the Alternative for Germany. So I think that does not pay off. So basically, what you can do is, of course, you should address, this kind of general sense of insecurity, uncertainty, that many people feel that there are things happening in the world that directly affect me and our daily lives, but there's nothing we can do about it. So this kind of feeling of powerlessness and so on. So this is something that needs to be addressed. That is partially a result of globalization. This is also in the European context partially a result of the European integration process, that decisions affecting our daily lives are made in Brussels rather than, let's say, in London. So these kind of sense of political powerlessness, that is something that the democratic parties, not only in the US, but also obviously in other countries, should address.
And I want to go into that in a bit. But if we turn to Ukraine, I mean, it's been dominating headlines here in the UK and around the world. When we looked at the language that Trump was using, you know, saying that Zelensky was a dictator, accusing Ukraine of being the ones that started the war, I mean, what did you make of that language?
I mean, it's obviously the rhetoric that also Vladimir Putin uses. So Russia is very happy about this because this is basically the Russian narrative. So, and obviously this is not really surprising because, I mean, obviously, as we know, Trump and Putin, they got along quite well already in Trump's first term, and Trump quite often basically used Putin's spin also when it came to basically meddling into the US elections and so on. So, I mean, from the Russian perspective, I think they simply see Trump as a useful idiot because they know how to play him. So basically, he can be quite easily be manipulated. And in this case, obviously, Trump, they also know that Trump has this narrative in a way, this very transactional view of international relations. So basically, he most likely asks his advisors, why are we delivering all these weapons to the Ukraine? What do we get in return? And now basically that's why he now wants access to Ukraine's natural resources. So for him, basically, the US must be paid. So and basically everyone is ripping off the United States because he sees no value in basically protecting or promoting certain liberal values in the world. So that is a clear difference between the Trump administration and other administrations. So this idea of the United States as a global leader of liberty, democracy, and so on in the world, who stands up to dictators and so on. I mean, Trump doesn't really believe in that. And he wants to be paid when basically the United States is supporting other countries.
There's another line of thought that potentially we've seen with NATO, for example. Trump, he says to NATO allies, look, you need to increase your defense spending, or I'm going to do this. And potentially the way that he's speaking about Ukraine, when we look at his minerals deal, for example, that deal involves that the US has to be committed to further financing Ukraine, but also to securing a free and sovereign Ukraine under Trump. Is there some sort of argument there that what Trump is saying, it's him trying to get his way in trying to get his allies to boost their spending in defense terms, for example? Is that some sort of argument that you think could be plausible?
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, to be fair, I mean, Trump rightly criticized that countries such as Germany did not fulfill their NATO obligations. I mean, and that is a clear contradiction because on the one hand, Germany often, or the German government likes to stage itself as a staunch supporter of NATO. But basically, it did not deliver on this promise, and Trump criticized that. So in a way, yes, you could say that Trump's pressure also, in a way, convinced or forced some European countries to increase their defense expenditures and so on. But obviously, Trump's rhetoric weakened NATO because a military alliance is also about trust and credibility. And Trump has repeatedly made statements that undermined this trust. So will the United States really defend a NATO member when it is attacked? Who knows? And this is basically Trump has really damaged the United States' reputation and soft power, and also the reliability or credibility of the United States in the world through this very destructive, very aggressive rhetoric.
And as you mentioned, you know, undermining that trust with his allies, but also we're seeing more generally with tariffs, what he's saying about Panama, Greenland. I mean, if we look at the way that he's speaking about these things, long term, how is that going to impact the US?
In the long run, it will also weaken the United States because obviously the United States is a global superpower also because it has like-minded allies that are relatively powerful in Europe, but also in other parts of the world. And without that, I mean, the basically power is increasingly shifting away from the United States to China, to India, and so on. So basically, the times or the period of global unipolarity of the United States as the most powerful state in the world is coming to an end. And in this future, more multipolar order, the United States needs like-minded allies. And Trump has obviously weakened the transatlantic partnership, especially, antagonized many European allies, and he's not seen as reliable, as trustworthy, and so on. And obviously also through his trade wars and so on, he's weakening basically the transatlantic partnership. So that is, in the long run, this clearly damages or weakens the United States as well. It also, of course, weakens the liberal international order. So basically, because it's now, in a way, this notion of a rule-based order is also undermined when Trump basically makes, these kind of territorial claims. This might embolden states such as China to follow suit. So this is very, very dangerous.
On the other hand, we saw Musk, for example, he appeared at one of the German far-right party, the AfD's rallies. We've also seen that close relationship there between Trump and Nigel Farage. Could you see the US moving towards forming new relationships, forming new allies within those sort of political parties?
I mean, they're already doing that, to be fair. I mean, when you look at KPAC and so on, so many many far-right European politicians went there and gave speeches. And this has been going on for quite some time. So this kind of cooperation, initially, especially between Farage and Trump. I mean, Farage already supported Trump's campaign in 2016. So he gave speeches at Trump rallies and so on. So, and that has definitely helped Trump because he often used Brexit as a positive example and reference point. So basically, we can, in a way, this anti-establishment movement that stands up against the elites, global governance, and so on. So that worked quite well, I think, for both Farage and Trump. And it also works well for other political parties because in the past, I mean, many far-right parties, especially, when we take the example of Germany, because of the Nazi era, no far-right party was very successful in Germany. But with the emergence of the Alternative for Germany, that has changed, and we see this normalization and mainstreaming of the far right in Germany, but also in other parts of the world. And basically, that is also in many ways an international and transnational process. So when basically far-right parties are elected in other countries, and then basically then it appears pretty normal. It's like the zeitgeist, so to say, that you have far-right parties in power. And that's why this is this support is so important. So basically these meetings, these gatherings, so basically this showing solidarity, exchanging ideas, demonstrating, we are a global force and our time has come.
The AfD Reform UK, for example, they potentially might not come into power until Trump is at the end of his second presidency. Do you think that Trump's taken a bit of a leap of faith there by investing his support and his time within, Nigel Farage, the AfD?
I mean, Trump, I think, is not that strategic. There are certain figures in his administration who definitely want to strengthen those parties. I don't think that Trump really cares that much about it. Obviously, what Trump likes is that these political parties like Trump. So that is obviously something, they adopted their slogans, America first, make America great again. I mean, these slogans are also very popular within Europe's far-right parties. Most of them like Trump and so on. I think that's why he sees them as potential allies. But obviously, I don't think that he has, this kind of long-term game plan. There are others in his administration that certainly, Steve Bannon, for example, in the past, he was someone who really tried to create this kind of global far-right movement. I mean, he also even called it the movement. So basically, he was more strategic. And I think there are some people in his administration who have similar ideas, who have a more long-term strategy here in mind. I think in the case of Trump, I think he just basically views these parties as, like-minded. They like Trump and so on, and that's why he supports them. But I don't think that Trump has any direct strategy here.
But would you say that this is a long-lasting trend for what we're seeing in the West and Western Europe as well?
Yeah, basically when we look at, Europe, you have far-right parties in power in Italy, in the Netherlands, in Austria, a far-right party won the election. Now in Germany, you have the Alternative for Germany that received 20% of the votes. That is quite a remarkable development. So basically that you have far-right parties across Europe that are so successful. You also have, with Trump, a far-right politician in power in the United States. It definitely looks like a global trend.
How sustainable is that, though? How long can a leader maintain that narrative of that us versus them?
That's a good question. Trump, so far he got away with it, and as long as there are, kind of crises and other problems, that for which, for example, the Democrats or the elites can be blamed, this might actually work for him. Obviously, we are still, kind of living in this kind of these times of change and transformation processes, crises, COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine and so on. And basically, these far-right parties are also seen as a kind of anchor of stability. So they promise security, they promise order by basically closing borders and so on. And that is still appealing to many people. Obviously, when we look back, there have always been waves of far-right parties and so on. And also after some time, obviously, you also have this resistance or also basically disillusionment. So basically that, many voters realize, okay, these parties have not really delivered on many of their promises. And also maybe their policies are quite negative or quite destructive for us in terms of basically jobs and so on. So, but I think for the time being, I think it will not change in the next few years. I think this will be a rather longer trend as it looks like.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Trump Report today.
Thank you very much.